Before the late king passed away, he left a final decree ordering me to marry Queen Lyra. However, after her coronation, she claimed enemies pressed upon every border, declaring that a union at such a time was perhaps not the wisest course. And so, for the sake of this fiancé I had known since childhood, for the kingdom of Viridia, I, Caravans, led 300,000 soldiers north into the frozen wastes and south through the plague swamps, carving out a bright future for the kingdom. Thereafter, the four corners submitted and peace reigned within our borders. Yet, these glorious military achievements did not earn me the queen's favor. In her eyes, the marshal of the kingdom fighting for his country was merely fulfilling his duty. I was nothing more than a blood-stained blade in her hand. Even if I were to die for her on the battlefield, it would be only as expected. In my previous life, when I led my triumphant army back to the capital, the queen I was betrothed to intended to marry a man of unknown origin, Florian Thorn. But this man was actually a spy from the enemy Ash Kingdom. I exposed his identity in court, forcing him to take his own life right there in the throne room. Because of this, the queen despised me utterly. So much so that 10 years later, a fabricated treason case implicated my entire family. 112 members of the Vance family were beheaded in the Grand Square, their blood staining the stone steps, heads rolling. As for me, I suffered the torture of 1,000 cuts, my heart and lungs ripped out, my flesh stripped from my bones, flayed alive. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the royal court at the very moment I had exposed the spy's identity. This time I would grant her wish. The imposing queen surveyed her courtiers, her cold voice announcing her decision. Florian is quick-witted, graceful, and possesses world-altering talent. The crown and he share a deep understanding, have exchanged tokens of affection, and wish to be lifelong companions. The declaration sent shockwaves through the court. Because I, the marshal of the kingdom, held a marriage agreement with the queen, decreed by the late king. Now, the agreement was cast aside, detrimental to the nation. Indeed, my Vance family had produced renowned generals for Viridia for generations, commanding hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers, serving as the kingdom's cornerstone. The old Prime Minister, Lord Elmsworth, deeply worried, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the late king's decree stands. Tearing up the marriage agreement could shake the foundations of the kingdom. The marshal of the kingdom has bled for this nation, such an act could deeply chill his heart." The old Prime Minister spoke the truth. Since the queen ascended the throne, for this childhood friend and fiancé, I led 300,000 soldiers north into the frozen wastes, south into the plague swamps, personally facing arrow storms, cutting through thorns, bearing dozens of scars, large and small, all to achieve Viridia's current state where neighbors pay tribute and the people live in peace. Yet none of this earned me even a sliver of warmth from the queen. Her gaze towards me was always cold and aloof. In her eyes, I was merely a sword for slaughter. But the look she gave that spy was filled with infatuation and adoration. The queen's brows shot up as she glared angrily at the old prime minister. "It is the marshal's duty to fight for the kingdom. What is there to be chilled about? Even if he died fighting for the crown, that too would be expected." I lowered my gaze, my face expressionless. In my past life, precisely because I exposed the spy, this woman ruthlessly slaughtered my entire family, leaving me without even bones. This life, I would say no more. My gaze towards the old prime minister held a trace of bitterness. In truth, the world-altering talent Her Majesty praised in this Florian was purely based on his appearance. This Florian Thorn possessed no skills, only a handsome face. His features were beautiful, his bearing elegant, his eyes seemingly holding stars. In my past life, I received secret reports detailing his background. A libertine from the pleasure districts of the Ash Kingdom, a womanizer who played with emotions and ruined the reputations of several noble ladies. He was supposed to be executed but volunteered to infiltrate Viridia as a spy to save his own skin. Later, when the queen was attacked during a tour, this man suddenly rushed out and took an arrow for her. Deeply grateful, the queen brought him into the palace. Upon seeing his astonishingly handsome face, the queen lost her heart to him, favoring him immensely. I had heard palace rumors that the spy was inseparable from Her Majesty, often staying overnight in the queen's chambers. In my past life, I feared Her Majesty was being deceived, feared even more she would be harmed by the spy, so I recklessly exposed him, forcing his suicide. Yet, the queen hated me to the bone for it. When my entire family was imprisoned, I begged her earnestly. She remained utterly cold, looking down on me with arrogance. "You caused the death of my Florian. How could I possibly spare you?" But he was a spy sent by the Ash Kingdom. What if he was a spy? All I wanted was to be with Florian forever, as eternal companions. I felt struck by lightning, utterly lost. Her Majesty had known the spy's identity all along, but she didn't know that her beloved Florian was a master manipulator from the pleasure districts who had ruined countless noblewomen. Even the assassination attempt was a meticulously planned charade by the enemy kingdom. Her Majesty never investigated, she certainly didn't believe my words. I only pleaded to leave some bloodline for my family, finally begging Her Majesty to spare my 3-year-old nephew. Yet, Her Majesty was heartless, refusing with a flick of her sleeve. Even killing your entire family cannot bring back my Florian. I shouldn't have been merciful back then. If I had killed you that day, Florian wouldn't have died. Hearing this, blood surged within me and I spat out a mouthful. Now in the throne room, the queen watched me with deep, calculating eyes, the spy standing right beside her. I knew she needed a statement from me. I gave her what she wanted, bowing deeply. Congratulations, Your Majesty, on finding a worthy match. This declaration chilled the hearts of the officials. The old prime minister turned pale, looking as if he might collapse. No one had expected me to relinquish the marriage agreement. Even the queen showed a flicker of surprise, but it quickly turned into a smug smile as she looked lovingly at Florian beside her. Silence fell upon the court. My own heart felt nothing. Having lived through the previous life, I already knew there was never a place for me in the queen's heart. Compared to her Florian, my face bore the scars of war, years of campaigning had roughened my features. My martial training had made me broad-shouldered and thick-set, lacking any hint of gentle refinement or handsome grace. However, others did not know that my Vance family was a bloodline lineage inheriting ancient powers. Only out of gratitude for the late king's kindness had we sworn an oath to remain in the mortal realm. My father had said our Vance family must protect the Viridia kingdom's prosperity for 100 years. Now, that century was nearing its end. In my past life, I fought endlessly for the queen, neglecting the cultivation of my bloodline power, weakening until I was almost mortal. Otherwise, my clan would not have faced such disaster. This life, I would no longer concern myself with the queen's realm and its affairs, but focus on cultivation. Once the 100-year period ended, I would leave Viridia. Moreover, my aptitude for cultivation wasn't poor, possessing the dragon blood Saint vein. After a month of secluded cultivation at home, my power had already awakened and mastering the ether was within reach. My clansmen also began cultivating under my orders and the entire Vance family's strength grew considerably. I no longer cared about court matters. Her Majesty now doted on the spy Florian even more. Indulging in pleasure and extravagance, the queen was rarely seen in court. That spy began interfering in politics, berating officials. Her Majesty, far from stopping him, followed his every word, treating state affairs like a game. The old Prime Minister, Lord Elmsworth, deeply concerned for the nation, lamented Viridia's imminent peril. He led a group of officials to plead with me, hoping I would step forward to impeach the queen, execute the spy, and restore order. I merely laughed it off. After how Her Majesty had treated my Vance family so tragically in the last life, how could I possibly repeat that mistake? I refused the official's request. The Prime Minister left, disheartened. 3 days later, news came from the palace. The old Prime Minister had been beaten to death with rods in the courtyard. He had risked death to remonstrate, listing the spy's misconduct, his seduction of the monarch with beauty, his overstepping into state affairs, pleading with Her Majesty to distance herself from petty men and attend to national matters. Her Majesty flew into a rage, scolding/cursing the old Prime Minister for being old and muddled, disrespectful to the sovereign, and directly ordered the guards to drag him out and administer 80 strokes of the rod. The old Prime Minister was dead by the 20th stroke. Florian and I share a deep love. Anyone who dares speak ill of him again will be executed. Her Majesty declared sternly to the officials, holding the spy's hand. The officials were terrified, no one dared to speak out anymore. Her Majesty became even more unrestrained. She ordered the construction of the lavish Starfall Tower for her Florian simply because the spy mentioned longing for the starry sky. Palace maids were blinded merely for glancing too long at the spy. The two often went hunting, disturbing villagers and trampling farmland. One day I encountered them in the countryside. Marshal Vance seems to have forgotten Viridia's kindness to you. To have leisure for hunting here, why not go conquer our enemies? I replied, your servant's old wounds have flared up, temporarily unable to lead troops. The queen sneered, her tone sharp. Since Marshal Vance is unable to fight, do you perhaps intend to surrender your military command and retire to the countryside? Mere excuses to try and fool the crown. Considering your past service, the crown will give you one more chance. You must dispatch troops within 1 month or don't blame the crown for disregarding old ties and punishing you. I retorted, since Her Majesty still considers old ties, then I too set a 1-month deadline. If Her Majesty expels him from the palace within a month, I will march immediately. I pointed directly at the spy, Florian. The queen instantly flushed with anger and embarrassment, her gaze sharp as daggers. Marshal Vance, stop with your veiled accusations. The crown knows what you want to say. It's merely resentment because the crown did not choose you. But there is no affection between us. How could the crown possibly like you? If you insist on this path, then the crown can only revoke your military command. My heart was already dead. I replied coldly, as Her Majesty decrees. Rage instantly filled the queen's eyes. She thought I was throwing a tantrum, her cheeks flushed red, speechless. Utterly disillusioned, I wanted no further entanglement. I bowed and took my leave. In my previous life, with me guarding the borders, enemy nations dared not invade. This life, with Her Majesty trusting a spy, the Ash Kingdom was already stirring. I had received multiple secret reports. The Ash army would soon mobilize. Viridia was already teetering on the brink. But what did that have to do with me? I was in the late stages of awakening my power. In just another month, I would reach the realm of ether control. My appearance had also undergone a dramatic transformation, becoming as handsome as the morning star, as ethereal as the forest wind. Shedding my armor for a white robe, I possessed an otherworldly grace. But I had no interest in flaunting my looks, using a secret art to maintain my previous rough appearance. It wasn't false modesty, I simply disdained relying on appearance to gain favor. For the next half-month, I didn't leave my residence, focusing entirely on cultivation. My power advanced rapidly, mastering ether was imminent. Meanwhile, based on memories from my past life, I ordered my clansmen to search the Whispering Witch Valley area. Soon after, they discovered a hidden ancestral Holy Land. With the Holy Land secured, I had my people relocate there. Viridia was now in extreme peril, Her Majesty growing increasingly foolish and tyrannical. A few days prior, the Lord Chancellor, the Royal Premier, and the Minister of Finance jointly submitted a petition begging Her Majesty to execute the spy and save Viridia. The result naturally mirrored my fate in the previous life. The 3 high officials were convicted of treason, their entire clans implicated. That day, heads rolled in the grand square, blood flowed like rivers, the streets sticky and difficult to walk on, the stench of blood impossible to wash away completely. Officials were terrified, many retired claiming old age or feigned illness to avoid court. Her Majesty showed no remorse, instead promoting the spy even further. The spy appointed a cohort of sycophants to fill the vacant positions. The court was now his domain alone. On this day, an envoy from the Ash Kingdom suddenly arrived. The queen summoned me to the palace. In the throne room, the queen was haughty, looking down on me with disdain. Marshal Vance, hiding in your home day after day, is being a coward comfortable? I could only offer a bitter smile in response. Seeing my silence, she became even more arrogant, pointing at me and boasting, how can Viridia possibly grow strong with people like you? Years of warfare consumed countless resources, yet you could never conquer the Ash Kingdom. But my Florian has extraordinary methods. He actually made the Ash Kingdom send envoys, offering submission. Marshal Vance, can you compare? I truly wanted to laugh. By what skill could her Florian compel an enemy nation to submit? Secret reports had long confirmed the Ash Kingdom's envoy was merely a delaying tactic. Their main army had already set out and would reach the capital's walls within days. Since Her Majesty has already reached a conclusion, why ask? I replied indifferently, my patience with the queen wearing thin. Karen Vance, what do you mean by that? The queen's brows shot up instantly, her eyes fierce, then she suddenly burst into cold laughter. Hee, the crown understands now. You're jealous. Jealous that my Florian has achieved unparalleled merit. Karen Vance, you truly disappoint the crown. Being unbearably ugly is one thing, but to be so ignorant of your own limitations. Tell me, how could the crown possibly like you? Compared to Florian, you are worlds apart, like comparing clouds to mud. A cold smile touched my lips, mocking, disdainful, but mostly finding her utterly irrational. Your Majesty, calm yourself. Why bother with someone like this? He's just a brute warrior, the spy interjected from beside the queen. He truly was a master manipulator, his feigned gentle tone made my fists itch. The queen, however, was deeply moved, taking the spy's hand and saying tenderly, Florian, if only everyone were as sensible as you. Your Majesty, with me here, you can rest assured. Good. The person the crown trusts most is you. The queen's eyes were soft as water, filled entirely with infatuation. Then her face hardened as she addressed me again. Karen Vance, from this day forward, you need not be the marshal of the kingdom anymore. Hand over your command seal to my Florian. This declaration shook the court, causing an immediate uproar. Stripping me of military command was tantamount to suicide for the kingdom. Yet I remained calm, handing over the marshal's scepter without the slightest hesitation or regret. Your servant's heart is already set on the great Tao. Your Majesty, take care of yourself. Seeing me comply so readily without any fuss, the queen looked as if pricked by a needle, flaring up in anger. Karen Vance, stop pretending. You just hate me, don't you? Hate that I don't like you, hate that I broke the engagement. But that's all your own fault. Your fault for being utterly inferior to Florian. This foolish ruler was becoming increasingly irrational. The resentment pent up inside me suddenly surged. Your Majesty! 10 years ago, in the Northern Campaign, I led my Iron Cavalry 300 leagues in pursuit, taking 120,000 enemy heads. Since then, the Northern barbarians tremble at the mere mention of my name. For 13 years, there has been no war on that border. In the Southern Territories, I led the campaign, captured 400,000 enemies, expanded our lands by 1,000 leagues, forcing 36 states to bow in submission. With such monumental achievements, I ask you, can your Florian compare to even 1/10,000th of me? My voice rang out, filled with righteous indignation as I advanced step by step towards the Queen, my aura imposing. The Queen turned deathly pale, staring at me in shock, likely never having imagined I could be so forceful. Fear flickered across her face as she hastily cried out, "Guards! Guards!" But I no longer had any interest in playing the role of a foolishly loyal subject. That notion had died with me in the previous life. I abruptly stopped, threw my head back, and laughed. I, the Marshal of the Kingdom, have spent half my life on horseback, fought 1,000 battles, and never known defeat. The powerful aura forged on the battlefield swept through the hall, causing the approaching guards to falter and retreat, daring not to advance further. With a flick of my sleeve, I turned and left. No one dared to stop me. Only a few days remained of the 100-year oath. I had already moved all my clansmen to the ancestral Holy Land, leaving only a few old or infirm servants to sweep the entrance of my mansion as a facade. I continued to read the secret reports from the Ash Kingdom. Their army had reached the Sky Chasm Fortress. The fortress commander, Lord Duncan, was resisting desperately, sending 12 urgent dispatches to the capital daily. However, all were intercepted by the spy Florian. He suppressed the news, clamped down on any discussion. Anyone daring to speak of the frontline situation was executed without mercy. A dark cloud hung over the capital. The atmosphere was heavy and grim. No one dared mention military matters. Only some well-informed nobles and wealthy merchants began quietly leaving the city. Inside the palace, however, music and dancing continued, presenting an image of perfect peace. Word spread that Her Majesty was building the Starfall Tower for the spy, simply because he had expressed a longing for the beauty of the starry sky. The Queen conscripted hundreds of thousands of laborers to build a 100-jong-high platform southeast of the capital. Countless workers died or were injured daily. People whispered privately about the Queen's cruelty and ruthlessness. No officials offered counsel anymore. The court was filled with sycophants who only sang praises. I paid no attention to the chaos outside, focusing solely on my cultivation. The ether core within my Danteon gradually solidified. A few days later, news arrived: Sky Chasm Fortress had fallen. Lord Duncan and his 100,000 defending soldiers were all dead, buried beneath the fortress ruins. Having broken through the strategic pass, the Ash army advanced rapidly. They would reach the capital in just 3 days. Simultaneously, news came from the palace. Her Majesty would marry the spy, the date set for 3 days later. The Starfall Tower was complete. Because tens of thousands of laborers had died, some said its foundation was built upon piles of white bones. 3 days later, I achieved mastery over the ether, reaching the pinnacle. Spiritual light flowed around me, a boundless power surged through my body. My features became flawless, exquisitely handsome, like a deity from a painting. But I still used the secret art to maintain my rough appearance. As I said before, I disdained relying on looks. I received a royal edict demanding my presence at the Queen's wedding, threatening to execute the entire Vance family if I failed to attend. Reading the edict, I sneered inwardly. The Queen truly had no mercy for me. She wanted me there simply to humiliate me publicly and likely intended to eliminate me within the palace walls. In my past life, I would have found Her Majesty's heartlessness unbearable. But in this life, I faced it calmly. How could a group of mortals possibly trifle with a master of ether? This wedding feast I would definitely attend. 3 days later, the almanac declared the day inauspicious for all endeavors. Yet, the capital city was adorned with lanterns and colorful decorations, more festive than any holiday celebration. Atop the Starfall Tower, the Queen, like a goddess fallen to earth, wore a fiery red dress, her shoulders bare, nestled in the arms of the spy Florian, her eyes filled with deep love. The Queen's peripheral vision caught me. She suddenly strode towards me, chin held high, red lips parting. "Marshal Vance, am I beautiful today?" "Very beautiful." "A pity, Marshal Vance, that you ultimately failed to win me." The Queen smirked, full of smug satisfaction. Just then, the spy walked over, wrapping an arm around the Queen's slender waist. His devastatingly handsome face turned towards me, full of provocation. "Her Majesty is mine. From now on, I will protect Viridia." The queen beamed, spreading her arms towards me. Karen Vance, did you hear? My Viridia no longer needs you. You are just a brute warrior. Did you truly think a marriage agreement meant you could have me? What foolish delusion, utterly naive. Disdain flashed in the queen's eyes. She turned back to the spy, her jade-like hand caressing his exquisite cheek, her gaze full of infatuation. Karen Vance, look at this face, handsome beyond compare, unequaled in all the land. What do you have to compare? The crown no longer needs you. You can go die now. Suddenly, the queen waved her sleeve. Guards! Seize Karen Vance! At her loud command, hundreds of armored soldiers surrounded me, the cold glint of their weapons chilling. The officials stood by, watching indifferently. The queen looked down from her high position. Karen Vance, do you have any last words? I sneered, replying loudly, the one facing death today is your majesty, not I. The queen froze, then burst out laughing. Don't try to be mysterious. You're at death's door, yet you still dare to boast. The one who will kill her majesty is not I, but the person beside you. The queen glanced at the spy, then looked back at me, her eyes narrowed seductively. Still daring to slander my Florian? You wretch, you will surely suffer 1,000 cuts. However, just as the queen's words fell, a piercing cry suddenly ripped through the air from outside the tower, shattering the sky. Your Majesty! Enemy attack! The Ash army has breached the city gates. Instantly, the queen's face froze, etched with disbelief. She stared at me in horror. Impossible! Impossible! The crown has Sky Chasm Fortress. And Lord Duncan. And 100,000 soldiers. I sneered. This foolish ruler was still deluded. Sky Chasm Fortress fell 3 days ago. Lord Duncan and his 100,000 soldiers died fighting. What? The queen shuddered violently, crying out, why did the crown not receive the urgent dispatches from the front? That you should ask your Florian. The queen paused, then her eyes widened abruptly. You're trying to slander Florian again. Florian would never betray me. It must be you, you traitor, colluding with the enemy, bringing them here. But as soon as she finished speaking, the spy behind her let out a cold, sinister chuckle. He's right. I suppressed the border dispatches. In that instant, the queen looked as if struck by lightning. She turned her head in astonishment towards her Florian, as if seeing a complete stranger. The queen asked, trembling, You? Why would you do this? Because I am a spy for the Ash Kingdom. Naturally, I had to suppress the military reports. The spy stated matter-of-factly, his face alight with the smugness of a successful scheme. The queen's body trembled uncontrollably. She couldn't comprehend how the man before her could betray her. But, the crown treated you so well. The crown gave you everything. The queen's face contorted with rage, but all she received was a heartless laugh. The spy lifted her chin. Silly woman, what I want is your kingdom. Once Viridia falls, I'll be in theft as a regional lord. Then I won't have to serve a fool like you anymore. The queen's soul shuddered, her eyes vacant and lost. But, that's not what you said before. You said you would help me restore Viridia. You said you would do anything for me. Silly woman, you believed the lies I fed you. The spy wore a mocking smile and slapped her hard across the face. The queen fell to the ground, shame, anger, and humiliation washing over her. At this moment, she finally understood her own foolishness. She screamed hysterically at those around her. Quick! Seize this treacherous villain. What are you standing there for? The civil and military officials didn't move. The hundreds of guards didn't move. Everyone's eyes held only mockery. Her Florian already controlled the entire court. The Lord Chancellor, Jorn, stepped forward then, pointing at the queen and cursing, Foolish ruler! You persecuted loyal subjects, acted Hunyung Wudal, foolishly and without principle. We will no longer be your subjects. We are willing to follow Lord Florian. You! How could you? The queen's face turned deathly gray. In her despair, even through her delusion, she could understand. She was utterly abandoned, with no one to help her. Recalling the events of the past 2 months, regret and remorse overwhelmed her, and tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. The spy stepped forward and placed his foot on the queen's body, his eyes filled with disgust. Stupid woman, do you know how repulsive you are? Did you really think you were a once-in-a-millennium queen, possessing unparalleled grace? You're hideously ugly, yet you think you're a peerless beauty. Do you know? You're not even as good as a prostitute in the red light district. Prostitute? You? Who are you really? The queen's gaze trembled. Hee hee, the spy sneered, leaning down. Listen closely. I'm just a nobody who scraped by on the streets. Ha ha ha. His unrestrained laughter echoed as the queen's body trembled uncontrollably. You were just a commoner. A sharp slap. The spy's eyes glinted fiercely. You're the degenerate one. If you hadn't been obsessed with my looks, how would I have had the chance to overthrow this ironclad Viridia? Who are you calling a commoner? Seeing the queen's utter humiliation, the spy laughed wildly, kicking her several more times. Bitch! Bitch! You're the real bitch. Making me kneel and lick your feet every time we were intimate. Aren't you disgusting? He kicked the queen savagely. She tumbled down the steps, her beauty marred, landing in a heap at my feet. I looked down at her. The queen's eyes were full of tears, her hair disheveled, stripped of her former regal grace and charm. Now she looked like a common shrew, thrashing about. She looked up at me, her gaze darting away, before finally grabbing onto my leg. Marshal Vance, you are the crown's marshal of the kingdom. Quickly, help the crown kill them. My lips twitched. This foolish ruler was still so shameless. Just then, the tolling of the ancient clock tower echoed. The 100-year period was over. I no longer had any reason to protect this kingdom of Viridia. Foolish ruler, I am no longer your marshal of the kingdom. You personally dismissed me. Do you intend to slap your own face now? The queen frantically shook her head. No, no. You are still the crown's marshal. What the crown said. I couldn't help but laugh. Just moments ago, you accused me of slandering your Florian. How is it different now? The queen shook her head wildly. No, Marshal Vance, you are loyal and patriotic. It was the crown who failed you. I looked up at the starry sky. You also said I couldn't compare to your Florian's beauty, that I was an ugly monster. Tears streamed down the queen's face as she shook her head. No, that's not true. The crown was bewitched by him. The crown is willing to marry you, be your wife. The throne will be yours too. Get lost. I don't care about your throne. I was disgusted. This woman was still so self-important. I shook off her hand, then suddenly threw my head back and laughed, releasing all the pent-up frustration, the resentment from 2 lifetimes. I fought north and south for you, risked life and limb. How did you treat me? My achievements were monumental, yet you judged me by appearance. How did you treat me? In your eyes, a handsome face was everything. Our marriage agreement easily discarded. How did you treat me? I neglected my cultivation for you, lived like a mortal for 20 years, dedicated myself entirely to your Viridia, worked diligently. How did you treat me? Finally, I looked down at her, deep hatred in my eyes. If I had remonstrated like the old prime minister, like those 3 ministers, would you have executed my entire clan? If I knelt and begged you to spare my family, would you have agreed? The queen nodded blankly. I sneered. You wouldn't have. You would only have ruthlessly slaughtered my entire family. What happens to you today, you brought entirely upon yourself. The queen lay on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Karen, I know I was wrong. Save me. I'll listen to whatever you say from now on. Can a shattered mirror be made whole again? I stood with my hands behind my back, gazing at the sky, my eyes filled only with cold indifference. But I couldn't leave yet. There was one more person to kill. Just then, an arrogant voice rang out. Ha ha, good. The esteemed marshal of the kingdom abandons the queen. It shows just how detestable this bitch is. However, ugly brute, you must die today, because the king of Ash specifically wants your head. The spy's lips curled in utter contempt. I smiled disdainfully. Are you certain you can kill me? Why not? You're just a brute warrior with some strength, not some god or sorcerer. How could I not kill you? The spy's eyes flashed with arrogance as he threw down his wine cup. Hundreds more soldiers rushed onto the platform, surrounding me 3 layers deep. How about now? With so many men to take you down, no matter how capable you are, you'll have to surrender. The spy preened, his handsome face filled with conceit. Ignorant fool, utterly stupid. I scoffed. How could a master of ether fear mortal armies? Even against thousands, tens of thousands, I could come and go as I pleased. As the soldiers closed in, a spiritual light suddenly bloomed from my body. In an instant, Radiant light filled the heavens, illuminating the entire night sky. Mysterious runes flowed around me like waterfalls. A golden halo manifested beneath my feet, and I slowly ascended. The spiritual light pulsed outwards in ripples, like the advent of a divine realm. A gentle breeze swept past, turning my coarse clothing to ash, revealing the white robe beneath, flowing like an immortal's garment. My features reverted to their true form, exquisitely crafted as if by divine hands, skin fairer than snow, my eyes deep and serene beneath the glowing halo. My entire being emanated an aura of transcendence and nobility as I looked down upon the mortals below. At this moment, I was an ether master, untouched by worldly dust. The hundreds of soldiers scattered in terror, their souls shaken. Some were overwhelmed by the pressure I emanated, collapsing dead on the spot. The officials panicked, falling into chaos, some even kneeling and kowtowing towards me. Mercy, divine being, mercy! The spy was dumbfounded, his earlier arrogance replaced by sheer terror. He stumbled backward repeatedly. You? Who are you? I am an ether master, marshal of the kingdom of Viridia, Karen Vance. I announced, my voice clear yet filled with supreme authority. My gaze fell upon the spy, righteous energy filling the space between heaven and earth. You, a mere ash spy, have brought ruin upon so many loyal officials and generals of Viridia. Today you must die. No, don't. I was only following orders. Spare me, great deity. The spy trembled violently, collapsing to his knees, kowtowing desperately. How could I spare him? In my past life, the queen killed me because of him. In this life, the old prime minister and many colleagues died because of him. He had to die. I swept my palm downwards. The vast, majestic power of the ether materialized into a giant hand, descending from the sky, carrying devastating might. Instantly, golden light erupted on the high platform, rolling energy sweeping outwards. After the gale passed, a massive handprint remained etched onto the Starfall Tower's summit. At the center of the print was a pool of mangled flesh and blood. The spy was dead, his end exceedingly gruesome. The hatred buried deep within my heart was finally released, and I felt immensely relieved. Below, the queen stared blankly up at me, her gaze fixed on my face, unable to look away. So beautiful! It turns out you were the most beautiful one all along. How foolish the crown was. The queen wept again, her regret absolute. Truly, if she had known earlier, why did she act as she did? However, I would no longer be moved by these tears. Below, the Ash Kingdom's army surged up the Starfall Tower like a tide, rushing onto the platform, slaughtering indiscriminately. That's the Queen of Viridia. Brothers, capture her. We'll have great fun tonight. Suddenly, an enemy officer recognized the queen, pointed his saber, and numerous Ash soldiers charged ferociously towards her. The queen turned pale with fright, screaming as she fled to the edge of the platform. The wind whipped her long hair, wildly obscuring her face. She was disheveled, her clothes torn. Glancing at the rapidly approaching soldiers behind her, the queen threw herself off the 100-jong high tower. Floating high in the air, I watched it all unfold. With the queen's death, the kingdom of Viridia fell. My ties and karma in the mortal realm were completely severed.